Hello. I'm now going to play you a clip that will go down in history, and if it doesn't, it should.
Where are you? Where are you? It's been out here 10 minutes. Run back into the area quickly. Yeah, where are the man? No one disses our religion. Tommy, you piece of shit. We're here. Come on. You crying on Twitter and everything, you little bitch. Hey, everyone closing! Closing! Yo, chill out, man.
For those of you who haven't seen that clip before, I have to explain. The police are escorting, they are taking for 1.5 miles a mob, and I'm using the word mob deliberately. It's not a crowd, it's not a mass, it's not even a group, it's a mob of Muslims, and I'm using that word deliberately as well. It's not a group of men, it's not a group of protesters, it's not a group of political activists, it's a group of Muslims. No one disses our religion. Yeah? When their rallying call is Allahu Akbar, that means they're identifying not as a group, not as a political group, not as a protest group, but as Muslims and as nothing else. And that finger is the Nazi salute of this ideology. The religion is an excuse. They shout for Allah, but in fact they are followers of Muhammad, a man, and a man with an ideology. Whatever they say about God, Muslims take the name of God in vain all the time. Ya Allah is, meaning oh Allah, is one of the most frequent expletives in Arabic. It's not even considered particularly strong. You see something really impressive, you might go, Ya Allah. And then you hit your finger with a hammer and you might go, Ya Allah. But the point is, it doesn't have to be really nasty, and it's used all the time. But you'd never get a Muslim chucking Muhammad's name about in the same way. So let's get this straight. The particular branches of Islam, Shia and Sunni, which are now dominant, are not religions so much as fascist ideologies. They hold sacred the memory and reputation of the man who started this ideology, with very little real reference to God, and just like the fascists today hold sacred the name of Adolf Hitler. I know there are many good and law-abiding Muslims who might be watching this who think I'm being too strong, but ISIS is where your religion is ending up at the moment. I am, of course, excluding Ahmadis and Ismailis. I'm talking about the major branches. That mob there was guided to a working class estate by the police, who stood by while members of this mob threw rocks about in a quiet suburban area and jumped into people's gardens, and I have read also broke windows. Is this not the police using this mob of mindless fascists as some means of terrorising and controlling another group of people without them lifting a finger? Because you can see they didn't lift a finger. There are many shots there of the police just standing watching while rocks are being thrown, while masked men are terrorising a neighbourhood. We can speculate all we like about why the police did that. It seems not to make any sense at all. Did they get their instructions from on high, just as we've recently heard that the Home Office sent specific instructions to the various police authorities telling them not to investigate or pursue reports about gangs of Muslim men raping children. Was this crowd of thugs actually directed by some government department? Or did it just happen because a police chief miscalculated or got the wrong advice? It's not possible to say. We can make guesses, we can make assertions, but we really can't know the truth until the official documents leak out or are released. But we can look at the facts and try to draw our own conclusions. First of all, we can consider the possibility that this dreadful incident was the result of a mistake. We shouldn't discount that. Mistakes do happen. Police chiefs might have the intelligence to pass exams, but that doesn't mean they're the best strategists in the world. And this police chief would have been taking advice from people. It's possible they weren't all that well informed. A few of the comments under my last video mentioned Hillsborough. I'd forgotten about that, and it was certainly worth remembering. There was a cup final football match, and for any Americans who might be watching this, that's football. Not that knockoff of rugby that you call football in the USA. There was a cup final football match being held in Hillsborough Football Stadium in Sheffield in 1989. A crush occurred. It happened when the Liverpool supporters were let into two stands dedicated to them, and the stands were really rather overfilled to begin with. But then, because of overcrowding at the turnstiles, the police chief ordered that one of the exits be opened to allow more people in quickly. The stands were already packed, as I said, and the resulting flood of spectators pushed the crowd forward into the steel fences at the front. 96 spectators were killed and 766 were injured from crushing and suffocation. And many of the survivors had life-changing injuries. And it's all because incompetent police made a colossal mistake. I understand the ambulance services were also not being competently run, and that added to the problem. Penned up football supporters in an area designed to take fewer than half the number was a recipe for disaster. And the people were prevented from saving themselves by that steel fence. The police then put out a story to the press in which they said the Liverpool supporters were drunk and rioting, and that's what caused the injuries. An official report later on, shortly after that, a couple of years later, had it that the police were solely to blame. But the Director of Public Prosecutions, the same body that later refused to prosecute Muslim rape gangs, I have to point out, the Director of Public Prosecution said that no one was to blame and there was no case to prosecute. After that, a coroner, that is, a dispassionate judge, ruled that all the deaths were accidental. Were they dispassionate? Well, later on it turns out they weren't. It took years for the truth to come out about the extent to which the police had gone to hide their culpability, but a coroner's inquest which went on between 2014 and 2016 finally handed out a ruling of unlawful killing due to gross negligence. The whole business destroyed lives, either of the dead, their relatives, or the people who then had to devote their time to the fight for justice. But whatever the subsequent dishonesty, it was originally a matter of complete incompetence. And so I have to remind you all that incompetence is a serious possibility in the Oldham business as well. And I'm not saying that excuses the police commissioner, by the way. If he's incompetent, he should go. just as well as if he did that deliberately. There's nothing more to be said about that, though. It could be incompetence. But, of course, there's the other possibility that it was done deliberately, and if it was, then why? If it was deliberate, then it was an attempt to break up the Robinson rally, or it was an attempt to have a running battle which would then be filmed and everyone would agree that Robinson's lot were a bunch of violent fascists. Personally, I go for the second option because the newspaper headlines tried anyway to give that impression. It said stuff like, violence breaks out at Robinson rally, rocks thrown at Robinson rally, and obviously the fact that it says rocks thrown and Robinson, in people's minds, if they were just, going past, reading quickly in a hurry, it would seem like Robinson was responsible for those rocks, wouldn't it? And so it looks like the papers were, in a sense, well, they were colluding with this. Although the participants of the Robinson rally actually were models of restraint, and I think it was a good move on Robinson's part to have it as a family event. At least on the Robinson side, it kept things cool. I didn't notice many media cameras in those videos I saw, so the media would have got their stories from police sources. If they were actually there, it looks like these reports saying violence breaks out at Robinson rally or whatever, it looks like either the journalists themselves, because of their own political opinions, were colouring it that way, or the papers were in some way under some sort of duress, because they weren't reporting that a bunch of Muslim fascists making their version of the Hitler salute were throwing rocks at families with children, and also at the quiet residents who were living in that suburb, besieged inside their homes on a sunny afternoon because their gardens were full of rioting mobs of rock-throwing fanatics. So then we have to ask, why would the police do that? I mean, what would be the purpose? Again, the only answer I can think of is that it was an attempt by political power to discredit Robinson in an effort to block his election. It would also, by the way, have an effect on the court case he faces. After all, as we've seen from other situations, there are all too depressingly many people in this country who condone punishment or violence against people with whom they have a political difference, which they wouldn't stand for people on their own side. In my last video, I mentioned being on the Countryside March, and I pointed out that the police violence against the marchers, I was there, they were a very quiet lot, but several comments told me I was a terrible person. The toffs got what they deserved, and they were unsubbing me, as if that would make any difference to me. I have news for you if you happen to be watching this. My channel isn't monetized for a reason. And that reason, well, there are two reasons. First, I don't want my videos interrupted by ads, but the most important one is that I'm not tempted to shut up because I might voice an unpopular opinion. Anyway, a depressingly high number of people said they didn't mind the police beating people up on the Countryside marches because the Countryside marchers were all total bastard. Now, that's not good. The Countryside marchers were observing the law. They were following instructions and staying, however difficult it was, within the barriers, and, I might say, picking up the rubbish behind them. Beating them up was a reaction of barbarity. And however barbarous you think fox hunting is, the reaction of the police and you was even more barbarous. Not because it's simply an assault on people, but it's an assault on democracy. It's an assault on the very system that allows you to push laws through which other people don't like, including the hunting ban. Anyway, that's a sidetrack, I suppose. Let's get back to the Robinson riot that wasn't. It seemed to me that it was a political attempt to discredit Robinson so that the sort of idiots who liked the sight of blood on the heads of the Countryside marchers would then countenance the jailing of a man who voices opinions they don't like. about Muslim slavers operating in British towns. Well, that's my theory anyway. Oh, and by the way, after I'd finished the main part of my video, I came across this little clip, which I thought might interest you. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe, and if you wish to donate, click the subscribe star link where you can make a one-off payment or set up a regular contribution, or I have a PayPal account at grannyopteryx@gmail.com. Till next time.